Hello, 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 everybody. Simon Whiteley here. If you'd like to give me a quick couple of words in the chat, let me know you're here, let me know you're listening, let me know you can hear me and see me. And just be mindful that there is a bit of a delay between what I say and what comes out of LinkedIn. It's a delay of about a minute, something like that. So if you could just type something in the chat so I know you can hear me loud and clear, I'd really appreciate it. So yeah, just to say welcome. So today I'm doing my next live stream series with the intention to have a live workshop next week or the week after, depending on how quickly I can get this finished. But today we're going to go through a submarine case study, and some of my clients are very interested in that, so I'm going to go through that in some detail. Now, I'm not a submarine operations expert by any means, so please be gentle. And oh, here we go. We've got some people shouting, all good. Thank you, it works. Oh, fantastic. I'm so pleased to hear that. It's the thing. Oh, hi, Mark. Good to see you. Hi, Mark, as well. Andrea, Yolanda, great to see you. Hi, Wendy. Great to see you too. Yeah, the LinkedIn live stream system, as I mentioned, it's a bit temperamental. So if you set the live stream up and then leave it for a few minutes, it seems to time out. So I have to reset everything, and it just raises the stress level a little bit. Oh, hi, Jeff. Good to see you. Great to see you, loud and clear. Fantastic. Right, okay, well, let's get some interesting things on the screen, shall we? So let's see if this green screen works. There we go. Oh, look at that. Fantastic. Nice and clear. Brilliant. Okay, so today's workshop, I'm going to go through the investigation report for the accident involving the HMS Astute submarine, which grounded off the Isle of Skye in Scotland in October 2010. So it's 15 years ago now. It doesn't seem like that long ago, but we're all getting old. But essentially, let's have a look. Essentially, what we've got here is this really, really awesome looking submarine. You know, these things are some of the most complex systems designed by humans, and you know, it's essentially a nuclear reactor underwater, so you can't really get much more exciting than that. Now, in terms of this particular submarine, it is an attack submarine, so it's not a ballistic missile submarine, but it does a lot of sneaky beaky stuff which I don't know too much about, and I couldn't tell you even if I did. Now, this particular one, as you can see in this picture here, this is in an area of Scotland. Where's my map gone? There we go, there's my map. So this is the UK, if you're familiar with it. I live down here in the southwest in a place called Salisbury, and this happened in Scotland, right up in the north of the country. So this area here is what is known as the BUTEC, British Underwater Test and Evaluation Centre. So this is where they put submarines through their paces. Interestingly, I used to work on BUTEC for a period of time when I was working with Kinetic a few years ago. So I've seen it from the range side, safety case perspective, but also my relatively recent work on submarines for BAE Systems. Not this submarine, a different one. So I have an appreciation from a safety engineering safety case perspective, both from a range operations perspective, and then also the design and development of a submarine combat system. Now, this particular incident occurred just off the Crowlin Islands, just down here. That's if I pronounced it correctly. And essentially what was going on is the submarine was manoeuvring in this area, ready to do some boat transfers. But unfortunately, the boat essentially ran aground in about this area here. So this is quite close to the Skye Bridge, Isle of Skye Bridge. And if you've had the opportunity to go there, it's a wonderful place to go. And if you haven't, I certainly put it on your bucket list. It is a very, very beautiful part of the world. So I highly recommend going there. Now, this area here is sort of what's called the inner sound. There is an outer sound a bit further up here. And the submarines essentially operate in this area and do various things that I'm not going to talk about. Now, this submarine is the HMS Astute, which is an operational nuclear-powered attack submarine. It is the lead boat of her class. So it was actually commissioned in August 2010. Which was about a month or so, 2 months before this incident occurred. So just to give you some operational context there. There we go. So this is a picture of it as it was stranded, and they were trying to move it away from where it was grounded. And of course, it's a tidal area, so the depth of the water is going to go up and down. Now, just to sort of give you some context then. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through this accident report, from cold, from scratch. I've only looked at sort of the first page in any detail. So this is completely new to me. I don't know what I'm going to find. I don't know what to expect out of this other than from what's described in the summary. Now, there's one of the reasons I want to sort of highlight that is I'm not an operational submarine expert by any means. I know a little bit to be dangerous, but obviously I've not read this investigation report in any detail. And what I want to demonstrate to you is that even somebody equipped with a little bit of experience with stamp, STPA and CAST can actually find interesting things, uncover interesting questions which you might not necessarily identify during using your more traditional safety engineering investigation techniques. And so I'm hoping as we go through this, I'll find some interesting things that you, as the audience, you can ask some questions or add your experience. Of course, don't divulge anything sensitive, of course. But just if you have some experience you want to share, please chuck it in the chat and let's discuss it. Now, of course, as I said, there is a minute delay between what I'm saying and what comes out of LinkedIn. So just be mindful of that as we're moving forwards. So yeah, let's get stuck in. Let's do this. So so just to put this in context. So this is an investigation report which has been declassified, and it's from an official MOD service inquiry. So it's similar to like in the case of civil air transport, you have an ICAO Annex 13 accident investigation that's done. This is similar to that, but it's by no means the same. And I'm sure if you're involved in these kind of investigations, you can comment in the chat and tell me what's different and why this is, comparable. Okay, so narrative of events then. So here we go. Whilst proceeding, the rendezvous for a boat transfer south of the Crowlin Islands on the morning of the 22nd of October 2010, HMS Astute, His Majesty's ship, or Her Majesty's ship at the time, continued on a heading of 130. So I've just put a little compass mark there just to sort of emphasise 180 is directly south, and 135 is southeast, and then of course you've got 130, which is not quite southeast, towards the Isle of Skye Bridge for 4 nautical miles until only minutes before a grounding. So you can imagine that this area is quite a small area to manoeuvre, and obviously seconds count in that sort of tight area. The speed of the submarine was slowed from 13 knots to 2.5 knots, but the officer of the watch, OOW, did not give any helm orders. So I'm going to highlight this in terms of a control action. As part of any stamp-based analysis, one of the main concepts, one of the main things that we're looking for is these control actions and whether they are potentially unsafe. Now, given that we're talking about an accident investigation, I want to avoid hindsight bias as much as I can. So it's not necessarily appropriate to refer to these as unsafe control actions. We would refer to them as contributory control actions. And there's a good reason for that, which I'll go into another time. So the officer of the watch did not give any helm orders that would have turned the submarine away from the danger on ship's head. This was despite being instructed to, on at least 3 occasions by the, I don't know what that is. If you want to stick that in the chat, that would be helpful. I'm sure there's an acronyms list and we'll come back to that. And then officer of the watch below. Astern revs were applied. So this is a control action to slow the submarine down and reverse it, as was a turn to starboard. But these were not as a result of an appreciation of any immediate danger to the submarine by the officer of the watch. So if we're thinking about mental models or beliefs of a controller, you could say that an inadequate appreciation of an immediate danger is a belief by the officer of the watch, because logically, if they'd have recognised or appreciated the immediate danger, perhaps they would have behaved in a different way. Rather to manoeuvre the submarine onto a favourable course for the boat transfer as instructed by the executive officer. I'm presuming that's what that is. Now, one of the things that I do whenever I'm reviewing an investigation or reviewing one of these safety issues, what I do is I capture what I call candidate controllers. These are the things that might be in the control structure model that we're going to explore as part of this investigation. And so always, in fact, actually, let me just jump up here. I'm sort of jumping around a little bit, just bear with me a second. So one of the core concepts of any kind of stamp-based analysis is this concept of a control loop. And if you've been involved in engineering or control and systems previously, this won't be a surprise to you. But essentially what we're talking about here is a controlled process. So if you imagine you're driving your car from point A to point B, or driving your submarine from point A to point B, that could be the control process, the submarine's movement. I won't use a car, let's talk about submarines. So this is the movement of the submarine, the particular trajectory, speed and direction, and because it's 3D as well, you've got the depth to think about. Now in terms of the controller, conceptually there is a person or a system, a controller of some description, or perhaps an organisation that is in control and influence of that control process. And so if we're talking about the submarine's movement in this case, abstracting all the different people and technical systems together into one big block, you could argue that this is called the submarine movement controller. And then if you wanted to add detail and expand, you could start looking at who or what is involved in that and what systems are available to them. But you've essentially got the submarine movement controller, and that controller has some beliefs about the control process, the position of the submarine, where it is in the in relation to other potential hazards or obstructions, obstacles. And then of course that control is making some decisions armed with that information, armed with those beliefs. And those decisions might be, well, there's an obstacle over there. I believe there's an obstacle over there based on the feedback provided to me from the control process. And I need to decide to make a change to the directional speed of the submarine, and that would be the control actions. Now, of course, if that controller doesn't believe there is a hazard or an obstacle, then of course their decision making is not going to be, rapid enough to make appropriate, control action, provide appropriate control actions to mitigate those potential for a collision. And so essentially this concept of a control loop, a jigsaw piece I like to call it, is the core concept of any kind of stamp-based analysis. And when you embed this model in your own mental models, in your own mind, you can actually start to see where these control loops exist all over the place, throughout your daily life, and of course involved in the safety work that you do. Now, of course, if you've read the literature or looked at the literature, whether it's Professor Leveson's Engineering a Safer World, her second book, or the papers, academic papers, or Dr. John Thomas's work with the STPA handbook or the CAST Accident Analysis Handbook, you might see those referred to as control algorithms for decision making. And that more technical term is used because when you're talking about engineering design systems, they have control algorithms. They don't sort of logically make decisions, humans do. And then of course for beliefs, you'll see either process model or mental model. They're the more sort of formal labels. But I've just included in here decision making and beliefs just to make it a bit more accessible to everybody. Fantastic. Let's just quickly look at the chat, see if everybody's getting on. We've lost the audio. Hang on a second. I can still see my levels popping up and down, so maybe it's you, Mark. If anyone else, let me just type in the chat. Can everyone hear me? Live broadcast. There we go. Let's just see if that works. Fantastic. So we've got Shane. I'm in Ferrum. Hi, Shane. Good to see you. Thanks for coming. Mark, Cameron, it would be nice to have a list of acronyms. Good luck. Thanks, Mark. We'll see how far we get on with that. There we go. Right. So as I was saying, when you're thinking about your control structures, these are made up of these jigsaw pieces. And so if you imagine an overall jigsaw puzzle, that's what you're trying to figure out. What are the puzzle pieces? How do they fit together? Jeff can hear me. Mark can hear me. Fantastic. Thanks, guys. And what we're trying to do is identify these control loops, these controllers, these candidates, and see how they fit together in a structure. And then, of course, when we come to do the actual analysis, we're going to analyze that control structure model. So what I'm going to do quickly is I'm just going to start capturing some of these candidate controllers to make it a bit easier later on. So as I said, there is a physical control process. And preliminary, I'm just going to say this is the submarine itself. And by extension, it's the submarine's trajectory trajectory. That's if I can remember how to spell. There we go. I've got a bit of a cold if you can't tell, so if I start to cough or sneeze, just bear with me a minute. There we go, submarine trajectories. We've got a submarine. And above the submarine, we're going to have some other controllers. Now this mentions, let's have a think. It mentions the OOW, so I think that's the officer of the watch, I'm guessing, of the watch. There we go. And I'm presuming they're above in the conning tower, perhaps, on the sail. I don't know that yet, we'll find out. There is also the, where are we looking? There is also the POOW. I don't know if that's the PO or the poo. Type in the chat, let me know. Oh, there we go. Adam, Petty Officer of the Watch. Thanks, Adam, you've saved me. That's amazing. Officer of the Watch below, and then we've got the XO. So let's do that. So we've got the executive officer, XO. We've got the officer of the watch below. We've got the, so Adam said it's the petty, I can't spell that either, oh blimey neck, here we go, petty officer of the watch below. So POOW, it's not below, there we go. Enlisted rank responsible for the officer of the watch for control and supervision of the watch. They are a key watch-keeping role on board. Thanks, Adam, for adding that critical information. Let's just put a nice thicker border around them just to sort of emphasise that importance. There we go. And then the executive officer. There we go. What is everyone else saying? Andrea says, yes, loud and clear, fantastic. Mark, thanks, Adam. Great to have an SME on these naval acronyms. I guess Petty Officer, but didn't want to take a wild guess. Oh, come on, Mark. We love wild guesses. That's what it's all about. Right, fantastic. So we've got those on there. Right, okay. So during the turn to starboard, the submarine grounded by the rudder. Oh, dear. Early attempts to free the submarine using ahead revs, MBT blows, main ballast tank and deballasting failed, and the submarine remained ground until shortly before the next high water at 17:30. So that was sort of a whole day stuck. During the recovery, some further damage was done to the submarine during a minor collision. Oh dear me. Minor collision with the towing vessel Anglian Prince. Okay, now, I think for the purposes of this sort of case study, I'm just going to focus on the circumstances of the grounding. We could do, if you wanted to, we could also look at the circumstances of the minor collision with the towing vessel. But I kind of expect and anticipate that this report probably won't go into the detail of that. I'm guessing, I don't know. Okay, so the root cause, here we go everyone, root causes. Everyone loves a root cause. Of the grounding were non-adherence to correct procedures for the planning and execution of the navigation. Okay, so there's some procedures of some description. So let's put, what is it? Correct procedures, so planning, procedures for planning and executing navigation. Okay. And combined with a significant lack of appreciation for let's get the red pen out. Here we go. A lack of appreciation by the officer of the watch of the proximity of the danger. Okay, so let's just quickly look at this control loop example. Let me just bring it to the top. So because STAMP is all about control loops, and not just failures, it's also about dangerous successes. We have to think about, well, if this controller is the officer of the watch and their control process is the movement, navigation of the submarine, why would they have a significant lack of appreciation of the proximity of the danger? Why might that be? Are we completely reliant on their human sensory systems to spot the danger and make decisions? Or do they have some kind of electronic or software related support systems? Or are there other people, organisations involved in that feedback path and the timeliness of that feedback to that person to be able to make decisions? So it's interesting that this is very much about, those controllers, not necessarily the broader topic. But again, you can't, maybe I'm being a bit unfair. They haven't used the stamp-based analysis methods to do this investigation. So, there's a bit of balance there between this is the best that they could do at the time and what I'm bringing to the table with stamp. Because this is not about blaming people. It's not about finding failures and fixing failures. This is a much more broad, holistic perspective to safety and investigations. Okay, so however, there's a number of additional causal factors were present. Fantastic. Including some deficiencies with equipment. Okay, so that could affect the feedback part of the control loop. Okay, fantastic. In conducting the service inquiry, much reliance has been placed on written and spoken statements because of a paucity of recorded electronic data. You see, that's interesting. So if you haven't got electronic data to support your investigation, we don't know what the reason for that is for the moment, but that's going to make your investigation much more difficult, especially if there is a contribution from the electronic systems and software. Maybe there is a contribution there that we can't explore further because we don't have the data. So, there's a recommendation there straight away to understand why there wasn't enough data. It says here, PMS data has been made available by the company, but no Big Brother, Mirror, Little Sister or ASNAP's data was recorded. Now, I don't know what those systems are. I imagine that they're something to do with navigation and data and sensors. And this is an unclassified report, so, presumably they're not. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about that. I don't know the detail. We'll come back to it. Okay, so chronology of events. So this is the standard timeline that we all love as part of any investigation. So high water was at 0602 Zulu, 4.9 metres. At 1812 it was 5.1 metres. Low water was at 1232, which is that's quite a difference in height. Wow, that is quite a difference in height. That 69% springs 3 days before spring, so I'm presuming that's the tide. Height of tide at time of grounding was 4.8. Okay. Tidal stream, morning civil twilight 0631, moonset 0644, sunrise 0711. Okay. Whilst undertaking contractor sea trials, okay, so that's the particular mission, HMS Astute has been conducting underway noise ranging overnight on the Rona noise range. Okay, yeah, so I have an appreciation from that, from my background and past experience. These started the previous evening at approximately 1700, so it's an overnight job. The trials completed early morning and the submarine surfaced at 22:04:49 Zulu. So is that 10 o'clock at night or is that 4 o'clock in the morning? I don't know. Somebody tell me in the chat, what does that mean? 22:04:49 Zulu. Is that the date 22nd and then it's 04:49? Yeah, okay, I think that's probably what it is. The day is that's the time. To commence a surface transit, so we're on the surface towards the Kyle, remaining patrol routine. So that is the sort of operational state of the submarine and the crew, and conduct a boat transfer 0630. So it's very early in the morning. There we go, morning civil twilight 0631. So it's still pretty dark. So going back to the control loop, why would it make sense for somebody not to recognise the potential hazard? Well, there's some context for us. It was dark, it was early in the morning. Due to the large number of riders required and the limited capacity of the submarine, a number of boat transfers were required to ensure that the personnel required for each trial were on the submarine. This would be the 7th boat transfer conducted at Kyle during this period at sea. So I'll just quickly jump to the map. So we're sort of talking about this area here, the Kyle of Loch Alsh. This is where the jetty is for where those boats would originate from. There's a helipad there, so they would come from this jetty all the way out into this area here to be picked up by the submarine and to get off the submarine. There we go. Somebody's commented in the chat. James, hi James, good to see you. That's a date, time group, date first, then time. Fantastic, James. Thank you for that. So that's a lot of boat transfers, I imagine. So the Tazo, okay, Lieutenant Commander surfaced the submarine, and the CBO, Lieutenant somebody else, as the surfacing officer of the watch, proceeded to the bridge, initially taking the look and then the submarine, once established with the minimum equipment that he needed. So they may be people we want to include in the control structure. So let's put that in there. Tasso, Lieutenant Commander, whoever that is, and then, or is it the CBO? Charlie Bravo Oscar. They are the lieutenant, not lieutenant for the American listeners. Lieutenant. There we go. Now, just to emphasize something there, actually. So when we're building a control structure model, what we're trying to do is recognize the explicit roles and responsibilities for a particular controller. And it may be that one human being might have many hats to wear. They might have many roles and responsibilities. And those roles and responsibilities require different feedback and provide different control actions. So if you have one person who has many hats, the potential for unsafe control actions is increased. So it's important to recognise what those roles and responsibilities are and make sure that they are adequately distributed amongst the personnel in your team, and that they understand where there are, clear roles and responsibilities, and if there's any potential for overlapping responsibilities, clarity is ensured. So I don't know what CBO or TASO is, so if you're in the comments, give us a shout, tell us what they are. Right, so yeah, second page, CBO, as the surfacing officer of the watch. So the surfacing officer of the watch, there's sort of three, it sounds like there's three different states there in terms of this role, officer of the watch. We've got a below officer of the watch, we've got presumably an above or on the surface, and then we've got a surfacing. Now it sounds like they could be different people with different roles and responsibilities, and there's handover between them. Okay, so let's have a look. Let's keep going. So proceeded to the bridge, initially taking the look. So I'm presuming that is receiving information, updating their beliefs, their mental models about the state of the submarine and the surrounding area. And then the submarine. There we go. So they're now in control of the submarine, once established with the minimum equipment that he needed. So when they are doing certain types of manoeuvres, they have a minimum sort of equipment need, so that they are assured they have the right systems available, they're all working, and there's no issues. Because of course, if there is issues with the equipment, then they have to adopt different procedures to maintain safe separation from obstacles. Completion of the noise ranging had overrun. Okay, so context there. And the submarine was slightly behind schedule for the 0630 boat transfer. So they were slightly behind schedule. Is that an influence perhaps on the decision making and behaviours of people? Maybe. The officer of the watch, the lieutenant. So I'm presuming that's the same. Person. Was instructed to make best speed to the boat transfer position. So they were instructed to make best speed. So who did that instruction? Which controller was that? Are they already in our control structure? I don't know. Speed to the boat transfer position and trimmed down on 4 main ballast tank, I'm presuming, and proceeded at 13 knots. The Tazo, Lieutenant Commander, acted as the officer of the watch below. So this person is now that person. That person is this person. Keeping oversight, of the officer of the watch. Okay, so this is interesting. So we've got Just move that to one side a second. Ah, what am I doing? That one and that one, that's what I'm doing. Put that over there. So we've got the officer of the watch, who is, that role has been fulfilled by the CBO lieutenant. Then we've got the officer of the watch below, which has been fulfilled by the TASO. So let's just put that above. Let's put that above. But the TASO is also keeping an eye on the CBO lieutenant, which is interesting. So let's just add an arrow from there to there, like that. We'll tidy it up later on. Don't worry about the formatting and all that stuff right now. We'll sort it out later on. So they are receiving feedback about those. They are providing feedback above there. Yeah, we're going to tidy this model up later on, so don't worry about it too much. So I've got a pen. Keeping oversight of the officer of the watch, who was not platform endorsed. That's interesting. So they're presumably under training, under some kind of training responsibility, some kind of commissioning, not commissioning, certification perhaps. The submarine was navigating on chart 2480, which was on the plot, steering a course of 168, 13 knots. So chart 2480. Now I'm going to add this to my, let's just steal this. Oh, no. I'm going to steal that for a minute. Right, so a chart is a type of process model or a map. And this, what do we call it? Chart number 2480. Chart 2480. So this is essentially a representation of the control process, the physical world. And that chart will have some... why is it doing that? What's going on? Yeah, that's why. Right. So that chart is a type of process model. It contains information about the physical world that will be used to influence the beliefs of the various controllers on the submarine involved in the movement of the submarine. And so if that chart is incorrect or out of date, or there's stuff not on there, or it's simply the wrong chart, that could contribute to issues with the beliefs of these controllers. Now, I'm not saying that is the case at this stage. I'm just pointing this out for your benefit. So when you're doing this kind of thing, you know, whenever somebody says there's a chart or a map or a model of some description, you can remember, hang on a minute, that information is going to have potentially some impact on the beliefs and decisions of a particular controller. That might be something we want to look at in detail. So chart 2480. Problems with the integrated communication system resulted in the officer of the watch directing that the audio panel on the bridge be replaced. Okay, that's interesting. So there's issues with communications equipment. I'm just going to put that on there just for, because it might be relevant later on. Because obviously communications, are we talking about onboard communications, or are we talking off-board communication and coordination, or perhaps a combination of the two? So we'll stick that in there just for good measure. Let's have a think. The remaining items on the bridge were being rigged, including the, whatever that is, secondary radar, okay, due to problems with radar 1009. So, okay, so there's a radar system involved in that. So let's just put radar surveillance equipment in there. I don't know enough at this stage to comment on it. Let's have a look. Fantastic. Next page. So at approximately 0600, the submarine took a course of 151, cutting the corner of the planned nav track to make up for lost time. Planned nav track to make up lost time. What's a nav track, everybody? So that's number 10. Don't know. Something to do with navigation. Presumably it's the track of the submarine. So I'm going to make that a process model, and I'm going to put nav track on there, because that is presumably the intended track of the submarine. Presumably that is deconflicted, a safe track to follow. And of course, if you're going to cut the corner of that, you've got to know where you're going, and that there's no obstacles in that area. So we're going to take that on. The time of this course change is not annotated in the fixing log. There we go, fixing log. So that's something that we're going to capture that as well. Let's have a look, fixing log. So who's in charge of the nav track? Who's in charge with the fixing log? At 05:45, the watch handover commenced. Oh, so there's a watch handover as well. Okay. Okay. How am I going to capture that? I'm just going to put it to one side, because I think that's an important topic. That is it appropriate to do a watch handover? Because essentially what a watch handed over does is the control structure as it is, with the roles and responsibilities and interactions and hierarchy. It has certain people in there doing certain roles and providing control actions and feedback, etc., etc. Now, when you do a handover, you're essentially swapping the content of that control structure for other people. And so, of course, that handover, that switch over, there has to be some kind of communications and handover of the state of the submarine and the surrounding area, so that the mental models, the beliefs of the new watch coming on is updated and is correct and current. And so are there any questions about how the watch was handed over? Are there any potential questions there? Okay, let's zoom in a bit more. At 05:45, the watch handover commenced. Over the next 20 minutes, the team in the control room changed. Fantastic. With the helmsman, so that's a petty officer, can't remember what that is, the plot, so leading seaman presumably, and officer of the watch below, lieutenant, completing their respective handovers by 06:05. So we've got, again, these might not be relevant to this particular case study, but I think we need to include them. So we've got people in the control room, we've got the helmsman. So let's press the right buttons, helmsman, petty officer, and we've got the SCOO, warrant officer 2. Don't know who that is. If you can type in the chat some of these acronyms, I'd really appreciate it. I mean, this is just an observation from an investigation perspective. Whenever you put a technical report out that's going to be read by lay people, please include a glossary, because it really helps. Plot. So somebody's doing a plot, and they are an LS, SSM, whatever that means, leading seaman, perhaps, I don't know. And then an officer of the watch below. So I'm just wondering if I need to include in this control structure model a handover aspect of this, as in there's potentially 2 helmsmen, one before, one after, an SCOO watch, and then a plot. I'm presuming the plotter is in charge of using the chart model, the nav track, and then the fix log perhaps. I don't know. This is early days developing this model. Okay, so the submarine moved into the area covered by chart 2498. Is that the same one? Oh, that's a different chart, everybody. There we go. So there is it. Oh, come on. Pressing the wrong buttons on the keyboard. There we go, 2498. So there's 2 different charts there. Is that important? I don't know. Maybe. Might not be relevant. Might be a bit of a red herring from somebody who's a relative layperson with operations of a submarine. The planned change chart position was marked on the navigational track at the 5722 north line of latitude. The submarine reached this line at approximately 0553. Indications on the chart are that the chart was changed at 0606, although this is not recorded in the fixing log or annotated correctly on the chart. Okay, that's interesting. This was some 12 minutes later than the planned change chart position. And was 1.4 nautical miles from the western edge of the boat transfer grid where the boat transfer was to take place. This is interesting. Between 0600 Zulu and 0605, the TSO, Lieutenant Commander, made his way to the bridge to relieve the officer of the watch, having conducted the preparations for his handover in the control room. He had briefly examined chart 2480, the chart on the plot, so that's this one, and checked the submarine status with the SCOOW and the OOW below. He did not put a fix on the chart, nor did he question the chart that was in use. Okay, so it sounds like the individual involved is essentially needs to check the charts and the status of the submarine. They need to put a fix on the chart and they need to question the chart that was in use. But is that something they're supposed to do? That is the procedure, that is the drill. And if so, why did it make sense for them not to do that? Were there issues with the navigation systems? Was there, challenges with that? That's not discussed yet. I don't know if they're using paper charts or electronic charts. Okay, to ease the reporting of position, a grid had been drawn on chart 2498, so that's the new one, by a navigating officer. So we need a navigating officer somewhere. Let's put that over here somewhere. Navigating officer. Was that a lieutenant, was it? Lieutenant. Lieutenant, yeah, there we go. Okay, so that's a navigating officer. They're going to be involved with the charts in some shape or form. Chart 2480 did not cover this area. Okay. Arriving on the bridge, he commenced his handover. So maybe a question for the chat. Is there a difference between the concept of the control room and the bridge? I'm presuming the bridge is on the sail outside, and the control room is obviously down below. Arriving on the bridge, he commenced, so I'll just put bridge there and then control room there, just to sort of emphasise that point. Are they physically different locations? At some time shortly before the 0611 fix, Astute had completed the shortcut to regain time, and at the request of the plot, the officer of the watch altered to a new course of 130, remaining at 13 knots. This course alteration is not recorded in the fixing log. Okay, so why is this stuff not recorded in the fixing log? Is that an electronic issue or a personnel issue? Astute entered the boat transfer grid, 13 knots at 0612, and continued to propel on a course of 130. The bridge was still being rigged, with the secondary radar yet to be switched on and some items still to be brought up. I think I'm getting an impression here that when they say the bridge was still being rigged, I'm thinking that they mean outside on the sail, and that to rig the bridge means bringing equipment up there and perhaps plugging it in or setting it up. I don't know. I'm just guessing there. If you know, stick it in the chat. If you can, don't go sharing anything sensitive. Andrea, chart 2498 most commonly refers to Admiralty chart 2498, a nautical chart of the inner sound, southern part along Scotland's west coast. Fantastic, Andrea. I really appreciate that. Chart 2480 is the inner sound central part. Brilliant. It's always good to have people who know what they're talking about on this. This is great. Thank you. On his departure from the bridge, the CBO lieutenant took the officer of watch binoculars with him. Realising this when he reached the control room, the officer of watch noted the lack of handheld VHF radio or chart and requested that these items were brought up from the control room with the binoculars. Okay, so let's just go back to this concept of a control loop again. So binoculars are visual feedback. Charts are going to be influencing the beliefs and mental models of the controller. And then, of course, control actions and feedback is affected by the ability to use and communicate with a VHF radio. So I'm just going to quickly chuck on here sensor category, binoculars. I can't spell. There we go. No, come on, binoculars. There we go. And actuator sensor related is VHF radio, handheld. There we go. Fantastic. Where were we? So we're over here. So we've got radio, we've got chart. Hang on a minute. I don't know which chart it is, so I'm just going to put chart. Don't know which one. We'll group those together like so. And we'll put them up here somewhere. Don't worry about this model. It is a mess. It is a process of divergent and convergent refinement. And obviously me doing it myself with the support of you great people is helping because I'm able to add detail or refine it appropriately. But if you're doing this work as a part of a team, it's a good idea to have those subject matter experts around you to help create this control structure model and validate it. So binoculars, okay, section 14. At 0619, the POOW reported the next fix. Recorders at 0618 in the log and marked as 0617 on the chart. So there's the chart and the log. And using the grid system on his chart, reported the submarine position as box F3. So Foxtrot 3. So this one, I'm presuming. I don't know, I'm not a navigator of submarines, you tell me. The fix shown on the chart puts the submarine in box F4, so F4. At a speed of 13 knots. The POOW requested that the officer of the watch slowed to 4 knots and turned to port to a new course of north. The officer of the watch acknowledged the report. Okay, that's interesting. He had no chart and could not therefore reference the position, did not ask for clarification, and chose not to alter course due to the presence of motor vessel Omar at R30 range 1.5 to 2040p. Don't know what that is. It's obviously to do with navigation and range to target, so probably in thousands of yards. The officer of the watch had no handheld radio. Oh, gosh, this is not looking good at all. No radio to inform Omar, so they couldn't talk to motor vessel Omar. So let's just MV Omar. So there was no ability to communicate across there. So let's just put that in there. Officer of the watch to Omar. I'll just make it red. You know, it's all the cool kids use red for bad things. So let's just highlight that. That he wished to turn. However, the submarine's VHS comm system was fully functional. Okay, so the submarine's VHF was working. So let's just let's say that that's the submarine's communications equipment, and then the handheld radio is that one there. So there's two possibilities of communicating there. We've got Mark. Hi Mark, good to see you. In the British Royal Navy Submarine Service, an officer of the watch below is the officer of the watch in the control room stationed below the surface. On a surface submarine, the officer of the watch stands on the bridge, but once dives, the responsibility shifts to the control room. Thanks, Mark. Fantastic. We're a really good team, everybody. It's brilliant. Right, so let's go to the next part then. So there was no impediment to a retiring turn to starboard. At 06:21, the submarine reduced speed to 4 knots, having advanced a further 1,600 yards from the fixed position and entered box Golf 6. So Golf, Golf, Golf 6, this one. There we go. The POOW below became concerned when he noticed the submarine had not altered to north. Became concerned. So that is, thinking about the control loop. So the POOW, the beliefs of that control loop are something's not right here, and they're uncomfortable for those various reasons that I just mentioned. And so what did they do? What actions, control actions did they provide? When he noticed the submarine had not altered to north, he came and asked the helmsman. So he spoke to the helmsman. So that's the POOW. Where's the POOW? There they are. And they spoke to the helmsman, which is there. There we go. Pardon me. That what course had been ordered. I was told that the submarine is slowed to 16 revs and we're still steering 130. Okay. At 06:20, so this is, so that's 06:21. So this is all very, within a few minutes of each other. It's all very sort of compact. So 06:20, the XO, the executive officer, passed the CO commander. So let's just get the CO. We've got the XO. We've also got the CO. So commanding officer. So they are, I think, that they are the main person on board the boat. So they are ultimately responsibility for the boat. Who had just returned to his cabin from the wardroom shower on deck 2. And reported that he was on his way to the secondary navigation position to direct the boat transfer. So secondary navigation position, that might be a candidate for inclusion in the control structure. So I'll stick that in there. It might not be relevant, but we'll stick it in just for good measure and remove it later on if we don't need it. To direct the boat transfer. Glancing at the chart, he noted the submarine's position in the boat transfer grid and proceeded into the fin. Briefing the boat transfer team, he proceeded to the secondary navigation position. The secondary navigation position flaps were still shut. I'm presuming that this is inside the sail in the fin. So what was that? Boat transfer team, wasn't it? Boat transfer team. Let's stick them in there. Not sure whether they're relevant to this, to be fair. But we'll stick them in there anyway, just in case there's some interesting things that we might want to consider later on. The secondary navigation position, flaps were still shut. Clipped and moused, tie wrapped. From noise raging the previous night. Using white torches, the ex-executive officer and a member of the casing party cut the tie wraps and unclipped and lowered the SMP flaps. This took about 5 minutes. So casing party, they might be relevant, maybe not. We'll stick them in there anyway, just for completeness at this stage. At 06:24, arrived at the bridge with chart 2498. So that's the second chart. Where is it? So the first chart is 2480, 2498 is the second chart. And 1 minute later, at 06:25, the XO emerged into the secondary navigation position with virtually no night vision. So, going back to the control loop, if we're talking about that individual, feedback to them, if they don't have night vision because their eyes are not used to the light levels, of course, that's going to affect their ability to provide control actions. At the same time, 06:25, the POO reported that there was 4 cables of safe water on ship's head by EP. Not sure what EP means. The officer of the watch below also bleeped the officer of the watch on the bridge. Line, Stanophone line, and informed him he was leaving the box and needed to come to the north immediately. Right, so that is, hey, that's an important piece of feedback. So this is the officer of the watch below. So that's this person. They provided a control action to the officer of the watch above. Or, well, there's a question there over, is it a control action or is it a type of feedback? And this is one of the common questions that I always get asked as part of part of STAMP STPA CAS training is, what's the difference between a control action and feedback? Or are there any other types of interactions we need to think about? Now, broadly, there are 3 broad types of interaction between controllers. There is control actions. So these are things that a controller provides or does not provide, which is intended to ensure safety or ensure safety constraints. And they can become unsafe control actions if they're not provided when they are required, or if they are provided in a specific context, and that could be timing related, so they're too early or too late. It could be due to their duration, so too long, too short, or it could be to do with the sequence. Maybe there is a sequence of control actions, and that sequence is important to safety, or perhaps even to do with magnitude, if that's an appropriate control action. Now, when we're talking about interactions that are not control actions, they can be feedback. So, a sensor can provide feedback to a controller, or another member of the team, they can provide feedback information to a controller to inform their decision making. And that, you might say that somebody shouting stop, stop, stop in a dangerous situation, you could say, well, isn't that a control action? And it kind of depends. It depends on where that controller is in the hierarchy and whether they have responsibility and authority for providing control actions. If they don't, you could argue that interaction is just some kind of feedback. And then, of course, there's other types of feedback, which is just information or data. And it's up to the controller receiving that information to make decisions about whether they should use that information and act upon it or not. So it's just information or data. Okay, so where were we? So the XO took the safe water to be the edge of the marked grid. Okay. Oh, sorry, let's just go back. So they bleeped the officer of the watch on the bridge line Stanophone line. So let's just let's include a bit of equipment then. So this is the, what was it called? The Stanophone. All this new terminology, fantastic. Right, so Stanophone line. Okay, so that's from the control room to the top of the sail, presumably. And that is between the officer of the watch below and the officer of the watch. Okay. So they informed the officer of the watch that they were leaving the box and needed to come to the north immediately. So I'm just going to make a note of that. Leaving the transfer box, need to move to the north. Is that right? Have I specified that properly? Has my unconscious bias crept in? Informed him he was leaving the box and needed to come to the north immediately. Immediately. Okay, so that's, again, is that a control action? Is the authority there or not? If there's no authority, it is just feedback. Okay, so the EXO took the safe water to be to the edge of the marked grid, having no reference point with diminished night vision and not expecting to be so close to land. Okay, so there we go, there's their beliefs, their mental models. They were not expecting to be so close to the land. So EXO took the safe water to be the edge of the marked grid, having no reference point and diminished night vision and not expecting to be so close to the land. Number 25, interview transcript. Okay. Querying the position with the officer of the watch, who repeated that he had 4 cables of safe water, the EXO questioned why the submarine was still trimmed down on 4 main ballast tank and directed that it should be made fully buoyant. Looking over the side of the fin and estimating that the submarine was still doing between 5 and 6 knots, he also directed that weight should be taken off the submarine in preparation for boat transfer. So this is between the EXO and the officer of the watch. So let's just, where's the EXO? There they are. And the officer of the watch. There we go. Don't worry about the hierarchy again. We'll fettle that later on. There we go. Right. At 06:27, a blow was put into 4 main ballast tank. This was followed by an order on the helm of slow astern, revolutions 30, which was not acknowledged. Right. So when we say on the helm line, is this a control action from the officer of the watch above to the helmsman? Is that what we're talking about? And there was no feedback from the helmsman. Is that what we're talking about here? Slow astern, revolutions 30. Which was not acknowledged. The helm line appeared not to be working. So the officer of the watch used his fallback communications, the WIFCOM. Oh dear, this is not looking good. So what was that called again? That was the helm line, and then the WIFCOM. Helm line, and then the WIFCOM. That's really disturbing. That is disturbing. That is. Why would you have problems without? I mean, it's time critical at this stage. So if we're thinking about unsafe control actions, let's just quickly jump to this. So in terms of doing an STPA analysis and in relation to cast accident analysis as well, the unsafe control actions are considered to be if the control action is not provided or it is provided but the timing is too early, too late, duration is too short or too long, or the sequence is the wrong sequence. Now, if we're talking about a speed command or a directional control change command, clearly there's a timing element to it. And so if the controller provides the control action to do X and that doesn't make its way to the recipient controller to then take action, if it's not on time, then that's going to be if it's not provided, then that's an issue. How quickly does it become a real safety issue? And then likewise, if it's provided too late, how does that manifest itself as a safety issue? So if they provide a control action through some kind of technology, communications technology, and it doesn't work, and then they have to switch to an alternate, there's a time delay between realizing the message has not got through and then having to switch to the secondary. And that time issue can obviously contribute to an accident. So that's really interesting if there's issues with the helm line and the WIFCOM, whatever that means. Okay. I just assume that it's it's one of the old full ahead. What do they call it? It's not a tiller, is it? What's it called? The thing that goes ding ding ding. One of those. I just assumed they had one of those. It's probably all digital. So the order was repeated on the WIFCAN. Again, no acknowledgement. WIFCAN was also being used by the EXO and the casing party. And the next report was one from the casing. Okay, so that method of communications has been used by somebody else. So that's... And the next report was one from the casing. The OOW ordered on WIFCOM hold all reports, slow astern, revolutions 30. This ambiguous order was acknowledged, and the telegraphs, that's the word I was thinking of, were put to slow astern at 0628. So that's like 2 minutes. Lieutenant Commander stated in his interview that he intended to order slow astern and should not have included the revolution order. The SCOOW did not question the anomaly. The EXO questioned the order but was not corrected by the officer of the watch. Okay, so there's quite a few people involved in this, all trying to communicate and coordinate with each other. The POOW was content that the boat transfer could take place close to Kyle and believed that the CO was prepared to undertake the evolution outside the southeastern edge of the inked-in boat transfer grid. LS had pencil amended the chart to provide additional reference grid boxes to the southeastern side to facilitate this. The CO, when questioned, stated that these grid boxes were only to provide additional reference positions to the officer of the watch should the submarine drift into those areas during the boat transfer. These additional areas were not marked on the bridge chart. Okay, I mean, I don't know what relevance that has. Okay, let's keep going. So, missing the 0624 fix, which was near to his interpretation of the boat transfer position by EP. So somebody's written, Mark, thanks Mark, EP refers to estimate a position, fantastic. So we've got Mark Cameron, I think R30 is red 30, i.e. 30 degrees relative from the bow to port. Okay Mark, thanks for that. Mark has said, on a British submarine, TASO stands for Tactical and Sonar Officer. Fantastic, thanks Mark. Let's go over here and update that. So where is it? TASO, Tactical and Sonar Officer. TASO, there we go. Senior Commissioned Officer of the Watch, SCO, thank you. Let's get that one in there as well. Senior Commissioned Officer of the Watch, SCO. Bridge is top of the conning tower, so you can have eyes of environment outside the platform, but only surface level contacts. Control room reliant on instrumentation, sonar, navigation systems, and other surveillance, periscope if at the correct depth. Thanks for that, Adam. Fantastic. Mark. And then Adam, Ship Control Officer of the Watch. Oh, here we go. Ship Control Officer of the Watch. Thanks for that. They generally sit in the front of the CO and responsible for driving the platform, overseeing the planes, man and ship control console operator. That's fantastic, Adam. Thank you. Right then, so where were we? So the POOW took the next fix at 0627 Zulu. This fix put the submarine outside the inked grid by 1,000 yards and now 1,100 yards short of the grounding position. He reported the fix and for the second time requested the officer of the watch turn to the north. Okay, so there's two separate control actions there. So this one, turn to the north. And that was at, what time was that? 06:24, 06:27. You see, the thing is, I've got to be a bit careful putting these times in, because is it the time that a particular log rec entry was made, or is it actually the time that a person provided a control action? So it's really important just to be mindful of that, you know, when you're thinking about the sequence of events, the timelines, and how these control actions and interactions interrelate to each other, just be mindful you don't inadvertently put some wrong times in there that then cause a little bit of confusion later on. So I'm not going to include that there. I'm just going to include that in terms of a relative control action sequence. Okay, so there we go. There's a picture of the plot. So plot fix 0617, 0617, 0621. Bridge chart delivered to the bridge. So they're getting very, very close to the edge. Okay, so the officer of the watch was now concerned about fishing floats. Fishing floats, 150 to 200 yards on the port bow, and not wishing to snag the floats in the turn, he stood on. Stood on. What does that mean? Emergency stop? Emergency turn? I don't know. Again, there was no impediment to retiring turn to starboard. So they could have turned starboard. The POOW noted that the turn had not commenced and brought this to the attention of the officer of the watch below. So we've got the POOW, turn has not commenced. Where are we? Turn has not commenced and brought this to the attention of the OOW below. The OOW below called the officer of the watch by stanophone and informed him the submarine was leaving the box. Leaving the box and needed to alter course to the north immediately. Despite considerable doubt over the safe navigation of the submarine, the CO was not called, as he should by astute standing orders. Okay, that's interesting. So let's just move that out of the way. Astute standing orders, SO. Okay, that's interesting. So the astute SO, we've got those in the control structure. So why? So there's a question there over whose responsibility is it to call the CO, and what's the CO going to do in the time available? Because if it's imminent, you know, there's not much they're going to be able to do unless they run very fast. I don't know. Was not called, as he should be. So why did it make sense for people not to do that? Was it because they'd just been in the shower? I think it mentioned earlier on they'd just been in the shower, didn't it? There we go. He passed the CO, who had just returned to his cabin from the wardroom shower. So he was probably having it. That was 0620. So 0620, and this was at 0624. So probably still in the shower, probably still wet, getting ready. The XO, who could now see from the secondary navigation position, observed the MV Omar on the starboard quarter and told the officer of watch to alter course to starboard. Right, so let's just go to here. XO. Using starboard 35 and increase to half a head. Have I done that right? STBD 35 and increased to half a head. STB 35 and yeah, okay. Fantastic. Yeah, okay. The officer of the watch carried out this instruction at 06:31. It was at this point that the XO now became quickly concerned with what he could see. He stated the submarine was very close to land. The Kyle Channel buoys in Skybridge were not where he expected them to be. The order to propel ahead increased the submarine's speed. Oh dear. As he realised the position of the submarine and the proximity of the land, the XO ordered the officer of the watch to report the safe water. The officer of the watch contacted the plot, who reported that there were 2 cables of safe water on ship's head. The XO directed that the CO be called to the control room immediately to look at the chart. The boat had commenced the turn and the XO decided, with the limited information available, to continue the turn. Astute was at 4.8 knots when it ran aground at 06:35. Let's just mark that. 4.8 knots when it ran aground at 06:35. Okay, slowly decelerating to 0 speed and remaining with ship's head at 220. It is the view of the service inquiry team that the 06:37 fix is incorrectly recorded in the fixing log, and therefore it is assessed that the submarine did not pass through waypoint 18. This effect of grounding, however, was not felt within the submarine, and the submarine was not brought to emergency stations. Okay. Right, I'm just looking at the clock. It's now 7:20. How far? Oh, right, so analysis of the events is in a couple of pages. So if you like, we can keep pushing on until we complete this section. And then tomorrow in the next, live stream, we can see how far we get through the second section. I mean, that's much more dense. There's much more technical information there, I'm sure. So let's keep pushing forwards and see if we can finish this section. Is there any questions, comments, compliments, commiserations you want to stick in the chat while I just have a quick drink? I hope this is interesting to you and find it enlightening in the stuff that you're doing, or that it's giving you ideas about how you could do this approach in the work that you do. Like I mentioned, I'm going to run a workshop either next week or the week after where we go through the details of this and look at the detail of the analysis. And I'll be answering any questions that you ask. Mark says, is there an invite for tomorrow? The short answer is yes, stand by. Let me just get the link for you. It's another LinkedIn event live stream, so I'm just going to try and find that for you. Just bear with me a second. Live stream number 2, there we go. So I'll stick that in the chat below. There you go, so that's for tomorrow. Similar sort of format. And of course we'll get through as far as we can today and then tomorrow. I'm anticipating that I'm probably going to have to do a third one, probably on Thursday. See how excited I am, and we'll get that finished this week. And then what I'll do is I'll stick a link to register for the live workshop. And what we'll do is you'll come and join me on a Zoom call, so it's much more interactive. You'll be able to ask questions and come on video, share your experience. And of course, we'll go into this in a lot of detail, so the case study and then the mechanics of STPA and CAST. But click the link and let me know that you come in for that. Okay, so let's continue. So, realising that the submarine was now very likely aground and without any navigational information in the secondary navigation position, the XO ordered the telegraphs to stop and went below to look at the chart. Arriving in the control room at 06:37, he encountered the CO, who had arrived just before him. Both CO and XO observed the submarine position on the chart, which was over the LDL and in a charted depth of 5 metres. Astute's rudder draws 10.6 metres in a normal surface trim. The height of tide was calculated to be 4.8 metres at 06:35. The CO instigated a series of helm and propulsion orders in an attempt to free the submarine. The bow was free to move, and the submarine was held aground by the rudder. And whilst the ship's head could be moved, no discernible change in the position was observed. The SCOOW was ordered to deballast the submarine, and the CO proceeded to the casing. At 06:45, from the casing, the CO ordered further helm and propulsion orders and MBT blows without success. Omar was requested to support Astute, and a line passed between the vessels. The line from number 1 bollards through the bull ring to the Omar was used to pull the bow towards deep water. On a heading of 315, Warden with a greater bollard pull was asked to close. I'm presuming that's another boat, another vessel, should I say. Warden arrived at 0740, so an hour later approximately, and a line was passed through the bull ring to number 1 bollards. As Warden took the weight and started to pull, the line parted and the bow drifted to port. A berthing hawser was immediately used to replace this line, and at 0750 a second pull was initiated with Astute at 50 revolutions and MBTs being blown. The hawser parted and the ship's head paid off to port due to the wind. Whilst deballasting, the submarine had reduced the draft. The tide was ebbing and had fallen by approximately 50 centimetres. With 3 range vessels, Warden, Moorhead, Sarum G and the ship's head at 251, a lateral pull was attempted at 0816. The submarine listed, to starboard. The aft line parted and no discernible movement was detected. To prevent damage to the submarine, safeguard essential systems, and noting the ebbing tide, the CO ceased further attempts to move the submarine. Compensating tanks O's and M's were flooded to correct the list and slowly settled the submarine's hull on the bottom. O's and M's were filled to capacity. The WEO, presumably weapons officer, don't know. Let's stick them in the control structure just for completeness. They might not be relevant to the accident at this stage. Where were we? WEO. There we go. Had ordered DCHQ closed up at 0730. Don't know what DCHQ is. No idea what that is. All personnel. In fact, actually, let's stick it on anyway. What's DCHQ? DCHQ. It's not Naval Command Headquarters because that's an N. All personnel have been shaken and compartment rounds carried out. At 0837, the CO ordered the SCOW to conduct further watertight integrity checks. Yeah, that's really important. At 051, the diesels were prepared for running. The ACDG came online. So is that alternating current diesel generator, presumably? Excuse me. Came online at 10:25, and at 10:47 approval was given by the CO with 1 DG defective, DC diesel generator defective, and therefore only 1 running AC DG. Electrical load reductions were implemented to leave only vital systems. Okay, what's Jeff saying? Weapons engineering officer. Thanks, Jeff. Oh, there we go. Weapons engineering officer. WEO. Fantastic. The second diesel generator was not repaired until 1300. When it was successfully run and connected to the electrical distribution system, at 12:30, divers started an assessment of the condition of the hull and seabed, reporting at 13:30 that the seabed consisted of soft sand and shale with no rock. Whew, that's lucky, everyone's relieved. The hull was lying on the seabed with the rudder embedded in the sand and shale by 1 to 1.2 metres. At the request of the CO and CS Almo representative, no idea what that is. CS Almo representative. Don't know if that's relevant, so I'll just put there CS Almo representative. I'm going to put the divers in there as well. The reason I'm going to put the divers in there is because they form part of an important feedback loop about the state of the submarine and the state of its environment. So for academic reasons, I'm going to include those, because if the divers were not available, or the situation was that the divers were not able to access the water or get around the submarine, then that might have led to different decisions being made. Now, the other thing that's interesting as well, and I don't really want to touch on it too much because I'm not expecting there to be a lot of detail in the rest of the report. That's about the diesel generators and the decision making around that, because I don't want to assume or presume, but those generators are going to perform certain functions, and this is a nuclear submarine, so they have to assure nuclear safety and the generation of electrical power. Now, it may be, and I'm not going to assume or presume for this case study, but it may be as part of an investigation of this kind, it might be worth looking at the control structures related to electrical power and nuclear safety. But I'm not going to go into that in this case study. So the divers then use the RIB to conduct soundings and determine the best route to deeper water. I'm presuming RIB is rigid hull inflatable boat, but I don't know because that would be RHIB. Anyway, yeah, so that is a picture underwater showing the rudder skeg embedded in the sand and shale. It's a bit difficult to see, but it's underwater and dark. So pumping out water from the trim tanks, O's and M's were estimated to take 2.5 hours and commenced at 1400 in preparation for the float-off. Formal approval for the float-off by signal was given by CTF 311 at 1549. So let's have a CTF 311. CTF 311. And they provide a control action to somebody, presumably the CO, which is, permission to float off, is that? Formal approval for the float off. Now you might be wondering, Simon, why are you including that particular controller in the control structure? And the reason I'm doing that is just to emphasise, when you're building a control structure model yourself, especially if it's part of an investigation, there may be controllers, candidate controllers, that you don't know whether they are relevant to the cause of the accident, or whether their control actions might be relevant to maybe a different accident. So for example, let's imagine the scenario is less fortunate than this one, and the CTF 311, they provide a formal approval for the float off when actually that's probably not the right or safe thing to do. And I know that's a different example, it's not this one. What I'm trying to do is just stretch your imagination to think about both failures and what I call dangerous successes. So this is where situations where the system has behaved as designed, but that has contributed to an accident. So if you imagine in that alternate reality, maybe the CTF 311, whatever they are, has made a decision to provide approval for the float off, but their decision is made on inadequate or poor feedback. For example, I'm just trying to stretch your minds a little bit. So we've got a few questions there. We've got Adam says, generally find using STPA, they grow relatively quickly in size and complexity, especially in situations where you have a complex organisation sitting on top of your control process, end up with large lists of UCAs. Is there advice around controlling this? i.e., is it more valuable to scope these to the loss of one safety function through your control system? It's a great question, Adam. Generally, you manage that to complexity through abstraction. So if you can abstract them into controlling functions, so there's not so many controllers, but they are abstracted into a higher sort of abstract level controller, with the control actions coming out of them, that can help with that particular problem. But again, also it's recognising that we're trying to model the real system versus trying to model an academic exercise. We're trying to model a real system here, so it is going to be complex, and it's our decisions and experience as modelers to make those decisions about abstraction. and whether it's an appropriate level of abstraction or not. I don't know if that sort of answers your question, but it is a modelling decision making we're talking about. Generally what you find is the control structure will get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it will get to a point where you start to refine it until it becomes sort of a nice crystal clear structure, but recognising it's not guaranteed to be like that. It is probably going to be messy and uncertain, and it's about the skill and decisions of the modeller and how far they want to go, and also whether it's appropriate at that level, at that position in the design life cycle. Are you involved in an investigation, or are you involved in early design concept of a particular system? Thanks, Adam. Thanks for that question. Mark, to Adam, I have found the use of abstraction level helpful here. I suspect Simon will have to decide the level of abstraction. Yeah, that's right. I mean, I'm just coming at this completely cold, so I have no real concept of what a level of abstraction would be appropriate. So I'm just chucking all these candidates on the page, and then over time we can refine that and identify which ones are relevant to this particular accident. If we were doing an STPA, we would approach it slightly differently. But yeah, thanks, Mark. Thanks for sharing your considerable experience. And as I say, if you're not already connected to Mark, please connect with him and give him, send him some emails, have a chat with him, because he's a very experienced guy and he can certainly help in the things that you're doing. So I've got Amit Chowdhury. Mark, to extend abstraction, hierarchical control structure per Nancy Leveson. That's correct, yeah. It's about abstracting the control structure model that we're creating, either through making things more broad or more narrow, and also thinking about grouping things in terms of functions or control actions, or whether it's an actuator, control action side of the control loop or a feedback side of the control loop. Great, so where was I? So CTF 311, don't know what they are, but I'm assuming that they are some level of Navy or government MOD level organisation that makes decisions about these things. And they may be supported by various subject matter experts. Okay, so the bow was seen and felt to move at 1600 as it floated. The aft trim tanks were dry, and water was transferred to the forward trims to lift the stern. At 1640, whilst checking the draft marks on the rudder, it was noticed by the CS Almo representative that the rudder was moving. Warden was attached aft and the Anglian Prince forward using the submarine's rip tow. Ship's head was pulled to the planned course of 350. A 2-second blow into 3 and 4 lifted the rudder clear, and the stern was observed to move. Fantastic! Yay! Everyone was relieved. As the Anglian Prince pulled forward, a further blow was put into the main ballast tanks, and the Astute moved slowly forward. After briefly stalling, the boat lost bottom suction. Yeah, that's interesting, bottom suction. And floated off. Yeah, because you've got this heavy object on the soft ground under the water. It's probably going to have a lot of suction before it's actually going to start moving, and that suction could have an impact on the integrity of the boat as well. A blow was put into 1 and 2 main battle tanks, main ballast tank, to restore full buoyancy, and the rudder and the EPM tested to prove steerage way, both essential to controlling the submarine behind the tug. At 1730, as Anglian Prince pulled Astute away, Warden closed in at the stern, but the submarine's headway resulted in tension on the line and it parted. The submarine was towed to the Butek range. At 1945, Anglian Prince slowed to a stop and allowed Astute to drift. Directed not to use propulsion, Astute did not check the headway and drifted into Anglian Prince. Okay. So if we were been, I said earlier on about, at the beginning it talked about, where was it? A collision somewhere. Where was it? There was a collision with a boat, and we weren't going to talk about it because I didn't think it was relevant. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, minor collision with the towing vessel Anglian Prince. We could do a really, really basic control structure. There we go. Let's just steal those two for a minute. So we've got, was it the Anglian Prince, and the HMS Astute. And then above that we've got whoever is involved in trajectory control, there we go, whoever and whatever, because obviously the propulsion systems are going to be involved in that as well, and the directional control. So they, I'm zooming too fast. Let's steal that and put it over there. So we've got a nice little control loop. There we go, another one. So the Anglian Prince is in control of its own trajectory. And then of course HMS Astute is under the control of its own trajectory. But of course if there's no propulsion control, you know, that could lead to HMS Astute colliding with the Anglian Prince, you know. So I mean, that's just a very basic control loop. I'm just trying to sort of give you some more ideas, more thoughts to think about. Okay, so drifted into the Anglian Prince, was a beam, Astute's forward casing as Anglian Prince propelled ahead so that the Omar could conduct a boat transfer with the submarine. Anglian Prince veered to port and struck the starboard bow, damaging the... oh dear. And a torpedo tube fairing plate. The rip tow had been severed in the instant, and the EPM drive, can't remember what that is, was used to check all submarine movement in accordance with the EOP for collision. I think that's emergency operation orders. The submarine was brought to emergency stations and damage control checks conducted. Once Ayrton Cross arrived, a line was passed to the submarine at 23:42 and both remained in position overnight at the Butek range. So that is the end of the narrative of events. There's a lot there to think about, a lot going on there. Just a question for you in the chat. Do you think that if the investigators had used a cast accident analysis approach and put a control structure model in the report up front next to the timeline, do you think that would have made more sense to the casual reader of this report? Tell me your thoughts about that. Damage control headquarters, thanks Adam. Responsible for coordinating damage control activities, thank you. Let's just DCHQ, where is it? DCHQ, damage control headquarters, damage control headquarters. There we go. In fact, actually, I remember seeing that mentioned when I visited the HMS Belfast in London. If you've not had the chance to go there, go. It's really cool, really interesting. Really interesting. Okay, what else have we got? So that's, yeah, there we go. So that's the end of the first part of the report. So this is the narrative events, the chronology of the events, all the way up until the end. And then the second part of the report is analysis of events. So we've got contributory factors. We've got, let's have a look, detailed analysis of the navigational plan. We've got detailed analysis of the execution and navigation. We've got some records. We've got some equipment. And then we've got the damage itself. And then first of class issues. Because, of course, this is the first of its class of Astute class submarine. So, you know, of course, it's going to have issues. That's like with any complex system. I mean, these things, you know, they're some of the most complex systems known to man. So we have to sort of anticipate and appreciate there are going to be some issues. Then there's some findings. So this is sort of the last part of the report. So the findings on 2 pages and then recommendations on 1 page. And so that is the end of the report. So I think we might be able to get through this tomorrow. I think it's going to be a bit tough. I think we might have to break it into 2 live streams. So tomorrow and then again Thursday. And then in the meantime, I'll set up a link to register to join the Zoom meeting for next week or the week after. But yeah, I hope that was interesting and useful. You know, I'm trying my best to go through this and read it from scratch so that it's a genuine sort of review from a stamp practitioner perspective. You know, if I'm reading a single source of information, what are the kind of things that will pop out? And also from an investigation perspective, what kind of things can I anticipate might be causes of the accident prior to getting into the detail of the analysis by the investigation team themselves. So yeah, if you've got any other questions or comments, I'll just hang around for a moment. Otherwise, thanks very much for watching. And as I say, if you do want some help, let me just share my screen. There we go. This is my website. If you go to my website, I'll stick the web address in the chat. If you click on the green button in the middle that says, I need help now. If you click on that, stick your name, email, phone number, and your message in there. I'll be sure to reach out to you and give you the help that you need. But if that's all the questions and everyone's had a great time, fantastic evening, or fantastic day if you're in the US, we will see you tomorrow. Thanks very much for watching. Take care.